Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank the witnesses. To date, do we know the full amount of improper payments COVID funds, Mr. Dodaro?
There are estimates that have been made on the unemployment insurance area in 2020. The estimate was improper payments was $78 billion, up from about $9 billion in 2020. And then there was another $18.9 billion of improper payments reported by the unemployment insurance program for 2022. And that was a 22% error rate.
Yeah.
And the year before was an 18.9 error rate. Prior to the pandemic, it was about 9%. And the PPP and EIDL areas combined is about $36 billion.
So we're talking $135 billion.
Yeah, just in those
doing the math programs in my head.
Yeah.
As you know, I like to do.
Yes, I do.
It appears to me that some federal agencies might not have been as forthcoming with information as both you and Mr. Horowitz would have needed. Small Business Administration potentially violated federal law by failing to respond to the GAO's request. Has that been the case, that they've not responded to your request?
It was early on in the start of the programs. It's gotten much better. And I actually had to go, and back in 20 and 21, I testified before the Coronavirus Select Committee, and I had called the chair and ranking members of the small business committees, both the authorizers and the appropriators, to get help. I mean, we couldn't get any information out of SBA at all. And it wasn't until later there was a lawsuit where they had to then disclose the amounts of loans. Now it's gotten better.
Well, one of the problems is that the unemployment insurance programs authorized under the CARES Act were excluded from the program's total reported improper payments because they were not in existence for more than 12 months. And these programs represented about 70% of the unemployment payments in 2020. Should Congress consider legislation to reform the improper payments reporting periods in order to more accurately track the COVID relief funds and in the future if we have to have this again?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's one of my legislative recommendations.
I would appreciate, and I've enjoyed working with both you and Mr. Horowitz over the years on things like this, if you would provide to me in writing your recommendations for legislative fixes. I want to move to something else. It's been discussed about what actions Republicans took, and I just want to ask you if we had required two-factor identification for online applications or provide state unemployment agency by fax, email, or other means of transmission a copy of the claimant's state ID, if we had utilized protocols to prohibit applications from foreign IP addresses, if we denied claimants using virtual private network identification, require individuals, I could go down this whole list of things. Would that have helped reduce the amount of fraud?
Yes.
Well, I just want to point out, Mr. Chairman, that these are recommendations that were made by Republicans in the House and Senate, including myself. I introduced a bill to do this that were largely ignored. When we began to see the massive amount of fraud, as early as I think April, May of 2020, Mr. Horowitz, I think, and working with the Department of Labor, the Office of Inspector General there, that billions of dollars had already gone out, and we couldn't get these guardrails back in. Would that have helped, Mr. Horowitz?
Absolutely, and the fraud did start right off the bat. I mean, the PPP program sent out $400 billion in 2 weeks.
Let me ask one other question. What we've seen in the last few months here is states using their COVID relief funds for things like New Jersey, $15 million in state and local fiscal recovery funds to bolster the state's bid to host the 2026 World Cup. We saw the state of Washington send out $128 million in $1,000 payments to 120,000 illegal immigrants. We saw Colorado Springs use $6.6 million to put an irrigation system at 2 local golf courses, $5 million state of Massachusetts pay off debts incurred by Edward N. Kennedy Institute for the U.S. Senate in Boston. are any of those improper uses of funds? I mean, I know we wanted to give them flexibility, but isn't that a little bit out of the box?
Yeah, well, there are broad uses authorized in the legislation for that money. We're looking at it right now, and so we'll try to identify those areas. They may be out of bounds legally, but it reminds me of the Recovery Act, when there was a lot of questions about the use of the money, whether that was appropriate or not, when it was really, legally authorized, because we gave the government gave great flexibility to the state and local community to make decisions. The other issue you have to deal with always at the money at the state and local level is fungibility of the money.
Well, they didn't have that early on. And, Mr. Chairman, I think this might be something we want to look into, because it's not just the fraud, it's the improper use of some of the funds. And my time has expired. I always enjoy hearing from you guys. I yield back.